Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Chesterton's Jest, where we keep a critical eye on faith and culture, especially within the Catholic Church today. But before we get started, follow Chesterton's Jest for reflections, humour and commentary rooted in love for the Church and a desire to seek truth together. Please like, subscribe and share. If something here strikes a chord, or even just raises a smile, let us know by hitting the subscribe button. In an age where even church teachings seem to be shifting, we're here to explore and question the ideas and changes that challenge timeless truths. Through thought-provoking, often humorous perspectives, we aim to bring clarity to conversations others might avoid, holding fast to orthodoxy with the courage to question what feels off track. Join us as we dig deeper into the faith with reverence, wit, and a touch of Chestertonian insight. According to recent studies, 1 in 3 adults under 45 says they don't have a single close friend, and the rates of depression and anxiety linked to isolation are skyrocketing. Loneliness is now considered as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, increasing the risk of heart disease, stroke, and even premature death. In a nation more connected than ever, how did we become so utterly alone? The answer isn't just in our gadgets or lifestyles, and unless we address this deeper crisis, no amount of likes, followers, or self-help seminars will save us. Let's get into this, shall we? Loneliness in America, a crisis of virtue. In a nation where we can communicate across oceans in milliseconds and boast more friends on social media than most saints had in their earthly lives, one might assume loneliness should be as outdated as candlelight for evening reading. Yet, here we are amidst an epidemic of isolation, one so pervasive it rivals any physical pandemic. What's the cause? Technology, they say. Or perhaps urban sprawl, fractured families, or even our obsession with success. But these explanations, while tempting, are symptoms rather than causes. The true culprit is something deeper. America suffers from a crisis of virtue. And like any crisis of the soul, the remedy is not more programs, policies, or distractions, but a return to the eternal truths of God and His Church. Chapter 1. What is virtue and why does its absence create loneliness? Virtue is more than good habits or moral behaviors. It is the ordering of the soul toward the good, the true, and the beautiful. It is the glue that binds relationships, the bridge between self and other, and the architecture of a thriving community. When the classical virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, are absent, people drift apart. Without prudence, we stop discerning what is worth saying and doing, so our words and actions become empty noise. Without justice, we fail to give others their due, treating them as objects for our use or neglect. Without fortitude, we flee from the effort love requires, choosing convenience over commitment. And without temperance, our desires grow monstrous, consuming us and everyone around us. Modern America has not just forgotten these virtues, it has actively replaced them with their opposites. Instead of prudence, we have a culture of rash self-expression. Instead of justice, we champion radical individualism. Instead of fortitude, we glorify comfort. And instead of temperance, we baptize excess as freedom. Is it any wonder we feel alone? A society without virtue is like a body without a soul, lifeless, disconnected, and cold. Chapter 2. The Rise of Counterfeit Community. In place of true community, we have built a carnival of counterfeit connections. Social media, dating apps, and endless entertainment promise to fill the void, but they only deepen it. Like the prodigal son in a digital far country, we feast on the husks of artificial intimacy and wonder why we starve for real friendship. Chesterton might say, with his usual wit, that the modern man is so busy connecting to everything that he has lost his connection to anything. We've traded the warm hearth of shared virtue for the flickering screens of shared distraction. The result? We are lonelier than ever, because no amount of likes, follows, or text messages can substitute for the bond of souls that virtue makes possible. Chapter 3. The Church as the Antidote to Loneliness. Here then lies the great irony. The cure for American loneliness has been sitting quietly in the corner, like an old friend we've neglected. The Church, in her wisdom, offers not only a diagnosis, but also a remedy. She calls us back to the virtues that enable true communion, not just with each other, but with God. Consider the theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity. Faith binds us to God, the first and greatest relationship. Hope anchors us amid life's storms, reminding us that loneliness, like all suffering, is temporary in the light of eternity. And charity, the queen of virtues, moves us to love others as God loves them, not as means to our ends, but as ends in themselves. The Church also gives us the sacraments, those divine touchpoints of grace that reconnect us to God and neighbour. The Eucharist, especially, is the ultimate antidote to isolation. In it, we are united not only to Christ, but also to the entire mystical body of believers. What loneliness can survive such a union? Chapter 4. Practical Steps Toward Healing. So what can we do? Here are a few real-life steps toward breaking free from the prison of loneliness. First, practice virtue in small ways. Start with the basics. Practice prudence by listening more than speaking. Show justice by giving someone your time without expecting anything in return. Cultivate fortitude by staying committed to relationships, even when they're difficult. And exercise temperance by stepping away from distractions that isolate you. Second, rediscover the beauty of silence. In a noisy world, silence is a radical act. Use it to pray, reflect, and simply be present. In the silence, you will hear the voice of God, who never leaves us lonely. Third, seek out real community. Join a parish group, volunteer, or invite someone over for coffee or a pint. Just don't turn it into a Book of Tobit situation, where, as Tobit himself recounts, I went to the courtyard to sleep by the wall of the courtyard, and my face was uncovered because of the heat. I did not know that there were sparrows on the wall. Their fresh droppings fell into my open eyes, and white spots formed. Tobit 2:9-10. Yes, even saints have bad days, but let's avoid mishaps involving divine comedy and bird hygiene. Building true community takes effort, but the reward is eternal. After all, the saints didn't bond over ridiculous blunders. They bonded over a shared love of God. And fourth, return to the sacraments. Confession and the Eucharist are fountains of grace that restore what sin and distraction have broken. Make them a regular part of your life and watch how they transform your relationships. Chapter 5. A closing word from Chesterton. Chesterton once observed that all men matter, you matter, I matter. It's the hardest thing in theology to believe. Loneliness, at its core, is the belief that we don't matter. But the gospel tells us otherwise. We are loved, we are known, and we are called to love and know others. America's epidemic of loneliness will not be cured by clever technology or self-help gurus. It will be cured by a revival of virtue, by a return to the God who made us for communion, and by the courage to step out of our isolation and into the messy, beautiful reality of human connection. So, let's not just solve loneliness, let's sanctify it. After all, The cure for loneliness isn't just finding company, it's finding Christ. And when we find him, we will find each other. And so, dear friends, we leave you with a thought, a smile, and perhaps a challenge. As Chesterton might remind us, it is not enough to merely see the truth. We must share it with the joy and humility that truth deserves. That's what we at Chesterton's Jest hope to do, to bring the light of faith to the world, wrapped in the laughter that makes it bearable. Join us in reviving the lost art of Christian common sense. Follow Chesterton's Jest for witty commentary, irreverent humour, and an unabashed love for the faith that transforms everything. Please like, subscribe, and share. Because if there's one thing the world needs, it's a few more joyful jesters armed with reason. Finally, remember that the work of renewal is not ours alone. It begins with prayer, charity, and, above all, humility. Host a Chesterton night at your parish, start a conversation with a friend, or simply take a moment to reflect on the beauty of God's truth. As our patron saint of paradox once said, angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. So take up the call to live with levity, to think deeply, and to jest boldly. Thanks for listening. God bless you, and may the good Lord be praised.